You're out of your depth. Boardrooms aren't for bus drivers. The room had gone silent except for the mechanical whir of her assistant clicking a pen to break the tension. He took one measured step forward, eyes level with the polished table edge. You're certain you want to do this right here? The CEO arched her eyebrow, hand tightening around the folder in front of her. We don't negotiate with men who don't know their place. A murmur swept along the row of suited figures lining both sides of the table. His hand rested steady on the strap of a worn leather bag by his side. No tremor, no visible hesitation. A folder changed hands at the far end, the courier hesitating just long enough for everyone to see a name stamped in metallic silver. The CEO's own assistant paled, the circle of faces closing in. One board member mouthed words to another. He did not break his gaze. The CEO eased a finger beneath the folder clasp but did not open it. You don't know what you're risking, she said, voice flat as glass. He answered calm as before. You never asked why I walked away. Silence pressed into the space between them. For some, truth is an afterthought. For others, it's the one thing that survives the room being emptied. Stay until the very end. It started 3 weeks earlier at precisely 7:02 on a cloudless Thursday morning. The engine sputtered twice as Lee Caldwell idled the bus outside the back service entrance of Adams Motors. The yellow paint, once bold against winter's grit, had dulled almost to khaki. He checked the dashboard clock. He would be early, as always. He preferred the emptiness of a schoolyard at dawn, the silence between shifts, the unbroken circuit before the noise of children washing over the vinyl seats. He parked the bus at the edge of the lot and walked toward the dealership office to hand in the day's paperwork. Route logs, fuel receipts, the small triangle of a missed lunch noted in his spare script. His left eyelid tugged with the familiar ache of sleeplessness. It had been 13 months now, and he recognized the cadence of fatigue in his own movements. The tendency to grip the steering wheel harder than needed, the instinct to scan every crosswalk 3 times instead of 2. As Lee crossed the stretch of burnt grass separating the lot from the shining jungle of new SUVs, he caught his reflection in the vast showroom window. Cap slightly askew, jacket zipped to the chin, work gloves looped at his belt. Nothing distinguished him from 1,000 other men trying to make ends meet, except perhaps the way he paused, pressed thumb to temple, and drew a breath, bracing for whatever small indignity the next errand would deliver. He did not have to wait long. The dealership was busy with early bird buyers and staff arranging glossy pamphlets on glass counters. A red coupe brighter than Christmas tinsel sat at the center display. Near it, a circle of salesmen and executives stood like sentinels. At their core, her presence unmistakable, was the woman Lee had come to recognize from the community bulletins. Cassandra Stillman, board chairwoman, whose shoes looked as unused as the test drive she never attended. She caught sight of his battered sedan at the edge of the delivery area, her lips curled just enough. Gesturing to her assistant, she spoke in clipped tones, though not quietly enough for Lee to miss. Did you see what he drove up in? My old handbag cost more than that car. Laughter, brief and brittle, answered. Lee kept his pace, offering a polite nod as he approached. Cassandra's eyes landed on him, cold appraising. Any dents from children, or is that how it was made? He placed the paperwork down, slow and precise. Just here to return the manifest, ma'am. She examined his gloved hands. I expect professionalism even from the drivers. Maybe next time arrive in something that meets the company's standards. She turned away, dismissing him already. Lee folded the last of his receipts neatly before sliding them across the desk. That's the only car I can keep running, Miss Stillman. It gets me where I need to be. His voice was level, unobtrusive. His eyes did not leave hers, but neither did he challenge. She waved to her assistant. Have it towed off the lot by noon, no eyesores for customers. He waited for her to finish. Noted, ma'am. He picked up his bag, glanced once toward the row of school buses beyond the chain-link fence, and walked away. His walk was measured, deliberate. Only when he reached the access door did he permit his hand to tremble just once at his side. The assistant watched him go, curiosity flickering unwanted behind careful eyes. Outside, as the sun cleared the roofline, Lee tightened the strap on his bag. The noise of Cassandra's laughter lingered just long enough to sting. He kept moving, always moving. By late afternoon, the steel and stone quiet of Lee's small house pressed close. The locks were old, the kitchen table scarred from meals hastily assembled, the walls lined with fingerprints below 3 feet. On the counter waited a lunchbox with a note inside, his handwriting, deliberate as a surgeon's suture from another life. "Don't forget, you're braver than you feel." The sound of scrabbling sneakers announced Pearl before her face appeared, nose wrinkled, cheeks pink from recess. She clutched her small leather journal like a shield, cradling it in a grip equal parts possessive and uncertain. She set it on the kitchen table, flipping to the first blank page even though she couldn't read the blue ink scrawl filling the earlier ones. "Daddy, why do grown-ups say things just to hurt people?" Pearl's eyes searched his, round and unblinking. The question landed with the weight of a surgeon's blade. Lee, caught mid-motion slicing an apple, froze, knife suspended. He set the apple down, nudged the knife away with one knuckle, and exhaled through his nose. "Some people feel better when they make others feel small." His voice was soft, each word measured, not quite an answer. Pearl ran her finger along the journal's edge. "Do you mind that your car is ugly?" Her bluntness forced a smile, brief and unguarded. Lee laughed, a single exhale. "I don't drive it to be pretty, just to get you breakfast before school." He folded a napkin, set it gently beside the journal, and reached into the fridge for milk. The half-empty glass bottle, branded from a regional dairy, always $1 more than its generic cousin, had survived from habit, reminders of trips passed with his wife to the old market off Mason Street. That bottle joined an unused lipstick on a high shelf and a hospital wristband, the band's edges worn smooth. After her aneurysm, nothing in the house remained quite untouched. Pearl watched him silently, the tip of her tongue caught at the edge of her teeth, as if waiting for a secret not meant for her age. She traced a careful P onto the paper. Lee tucked her lunch note into the front of her blue backpack. "You'll always find your way home, even if the world's messy, promise." She clambered onto his lap, journal pressed between them. "It's nice you know how to fix things, Daddy," she whispered. Her trust, total and accepting, left him exposed, no armor but kindness. At the doorway, as she slipped on shoes, Lee handed her a dime. His ritual, a carryover from hospital nights survived on vending machine coffee. "Emergency money, only for real emergencies." She grinned, stowing it beside the journal. He watched her go, the door closing behind her with a click both familiar and too final. Alone, Lee set the kitchen timer for tomorrow's pre-dawn routine as the first hint of fatigue threaded through his neck. He would not sleep for hours. 3 blocks west and 32 floors up, glass collected city light in the penthouse office of Cassandra Stillman, rendering human silhouettes statuesque. She stood by the pane, orchestration in every gesture, gazing down as if the whole city had been arranged for her review. Around her, assistants moved with choreographed deference, briefcases snapping open, tablets proffered at just the right angle. "Schedule the board," she ordered, her words clipped, the imperative sharpened by impatience. "Find out what happened with Unit 9, no delays, and tell security no exceptions for non-essential personnel." One assistant hesitated near a console, glancing toward a small porcelain elephant perched between stacks of contracts. Cassandra's eyes flicked there, measuring. "Remove that, now." She turned away, gathering a folder deep green and embossed, pausing with her hand flat against its cover. Along the glass credenza lay a sonogram, a grainy image, dated only 4 weeks prior, bundled with a sympathy card from the chief of staff. She didn't touch either artifact, but her focus lingered an extra beat. Cassandra moved briskly to her desk. Her phone vibrated, a doctor's appointment, canceled, then rescheduled for 8 weeks out. She scanned it, expression unchanged. "Delay nothing, move the calls up," she said to her assistant before signaling the call's end. For a long moment, she slipped into her father's old office chair, the texture near threadbare where he once gripped during late financial storms. A thin folder labeled Caldwell L. Decline 2018 rested atop the pile. Cassandra tapped it, memory slicing in. A brief phone call summoned her focus. "We need to move the bus driver's application out of review, transfer it, then lock it. He's not what we want." The order came out with mechanical clarity. The assistant, a well-dressed man in gray with uncertain eyes, nodded. "Of course, Miss Stillman, anything else?" She arched an eyebrow. "If that car is still on the lot at noon, I'll assume you want my job." The half-smile was professional, humor sharpened with warning. He ducked his head, scribbled a note, and departed, closing the door with narcotic quiet. Alone again, Cassandra folded and unfolded the sonogram, hands paused long on the empty space beside her desk where her husband's framed photo used to sit. The pain, chronic, unbidden, hovered like a second shadow. Her phone buzzed again. In 2 days, the board would meet, and no outlier could threaten the show of order she needed now. Outside, the world moved on, indifferent. The next morning at Adams Motors, a crisis had materialized before sunrise. A flurry of executives, legal staff, and tech contractors crowded the main boardroom, all eyes drawn to a stack of contracts worth more than the block they occupied. The firm's legal head, a man with tortoise-framed glasses and a stain on his otherwise immaculate tie, was rifling desperately through reams of paper. "The indemnity clause in Section 7A doesn't match the new lease standards," he muttered to a junior counsel. "If this isn't corrected before the noon deadline, the buyers can walk, so can the lawyers." Cassandra arrived at the tail end of panic, her presence ordering silence. "Status report, give it straight." "Technical misalignment, something isn't adding up. We'll need a forensic review," the legal counsel stammered. Lee stood nearby, half obscured by the conference room credenza due to finalize paperwork for a late route field trip. He surveyed the room, eyes on the flowcharts littering the wall, a glance, a small muscle in his jaw working. He stepped closer, careful not to crowd the suits. "It's not the property line that's the problem, it's the option to renew hidden in paragraph 27. His tone was light, almost unobtrusive. The legal counsel startled, rereading the document, eyes darting left and right. "How did you?" Lee shrugged. "The wording duplicates liability. It means the entire risk reverts back to the seller for 36 months instead of 12. Fix that paragraph and your buyers don't have an exit clause." The room went tense. No one moved. Cassandra's arrival at his elbow stole oxygen from the air. "Anyone can see a typo," she dismissed. A hush radiated outward as one junior associate in the corner lowered his coffee without drinking. Another whispered to the person beside her, "That wasn't luck. He didn't even have the docs in hand." The senior counsel recalculated, voice low, "He's right. This isn't a typo, it's a time bomb. We could have lost 300 million just like that." Cassandra waited, expression never shifting from impassive. "Let's move on," she commanded, "next issue." But a seed of doubt had been sown. The assistant who had dismissed Lee's car the day before watched him from the threshold, new calculation behind his eyes. Lee nodded, collected his route manifest, and exited. No swagger, no need for thanks. He had seen this before, 20 years ago. Evan Torres, Cassandra's assistant, found himself moving differently as the afternoon waned. The contract clause, simple in its devastation, preyed on his mind. He set his phone to silent and used the brief lull before the next meeting to pull up employee records, backgrounds vetted by HR, digital trails clumsily erased over time. But Lee Caldwell, bus driver, was a cipher. No LinkedIn, a blank entry prior to 2018, only a single declined application record stored. An unease, part professional, part personal, worked deeper as he navigated internal databases. After 15 minutes, he hit upon a letter, unsigned save for the closing, with regret, L. Caldwell. The original offer, dated July 2018, called for a role far above any driver, a director's post, contingent on medical board licensing. Declined, not rescinded, simply returned with no reason provided. That night, as Lee stood in his kitchen rinsing a plate, Pearl trailed him, journal at her chest. She caught his sleeve, turned wide eyes upward. "Daddy, why did she laugh at our car?" He dried his hands, leaned against the counter. "Some people forget what matters while they chase what doesn't." Pearl rotated the dime between thumb and forefinger, her voice heavier. "If her heart hurts, maybe she can't help it. Maybe she needs a friend more than a pretty car." Lee found he could not answer. His composure, so disciplined, flickered. The wall clock clicked toward 9. Lee checked his calendar, 2 more dawns until the funeral, the final tribute to his wife's father, 3 towns north, attendance expected, not optional. The time pressure wrapped itself around his remaining sleep, more debts, more demands tight as a bandage. Elsewhere, Cassandra's fixer was already making calls. The 2 phone lines in Lee's small home blinked with hang-up signals before ringing out. The next morning, the lot manager flagged Lee's car for impound, citing personal request from the chairwoman. An envelope with a final warning, noncompliance results in termination, found Lee on his midday route. Near the bus lot office, Evan intercepted the manager, voice low. "You don't want that on your record, don't be her tool." The manager muttered, eyes dropping, then relented, holding off. Their exchanged glances forewarned trouble but let the engine idle a little longer. Later, Cassandra's assistant found Lee, voice measured. "I've been asked to warn you, stay away from the board. The chairwoman has her priorities." Lee handed back the warning notice. "All I do is drive, but I can read a sign, we all can." Evan stared a second too long, as if seeing something newly sharp beneath the edges. He watched Lee's careful penmanship on attendance logs, the way he stacked his receipts. "Just be careful, she doesn't like loose ends," Evan whispered before turning on his heel. Lee went home that night with weight in his step, knowing any move might cost him more than his car. He looked at Pearl, already asleep, journal open to her father's last blue ink note. "Tomorrow," he said softly to the room, "tomorrow I owe you better." The following morning brought escalation. The apartment building's parking spots, a fragile, unwritten order, were rearranged. Lee's sedan had been boxed in, then towed by noon. The school called. Pearl's aftercare slot was suddenly marked pending payment, enrollment in jeopardy. In the staff lounge, Lee's lunch was missing, a note in its place, "Consider looking elsewhere." At Adams Motors, Cassandra presided at a staff meeting, voice glacial. "Anyone aiding outside contractors will find their privileges revoked. Our brand depends on loyalty." Her eyes flicked to Lee by the coffee urn. The message required no translation. He folded a napkin twice, thumb lining the edges, then placed it in the trash. He watched, but did not rise to her bait, posture held with veteran composure. Evan found him by the back exit, voice urgent. "She's not going to stop. She called your daughter's school personally." Lee's words stayed calm. "Thank you for telling me." He called a number, low and even. "This is Lee Caldwell. Yes, please send the courier. Today's the day." At Pearl's school, a substitute bus driver mispronounced names. Pearl gripped her journal tighter, clutching it through the confusion, quiet but unmoved. By dusk, Lee stood beneath a street lamp outside his building, tie from another era still buried in his pocket. He should not have made this her problem. The final reckoning took place on a gray marble stage. Boardroom transformed for maximum effect, glass walls drawing in slanted afternoon sun, shadows stretched long on the conference table. Cassandra addressed the assembled team, voice crisp. "We will now proceed with acquisition statements." Silence fell as the last seat was claimed. In back, on the pretext of document delivery, Lee entered, posture squared, jacket a shade too formal for a bus driver, the glint of a silver watch visible at his wrist. Cassandra's hand flattened against a sealed green folder at her place. She affected nonchalance, eyes flicking over Lee, then skipping him as if not worth note. "Boardrooms aren't for bus drivers," she quipped, to strained laughter. Evan, from the front, cleared his throat. "There's a document that needs acknowledgement." He handed her the folder, fingertips unsteady. The CEO lifted it, pausing as her own name shone in metallic ink, her signature next to Lee S., but his beneath a decline. "What is this?" Evan spoke clearly. "The declined offer, original 2018, resurfaced by request of the medical board's own courier." A soft gasp rippled among the board. The company's legal counsel closed his laptop, tension knifing the air. One assistant glanced sharply down, another began tapping a pen against his leg, a third, the junior member, watched with mouth parted, eyes darting between Cassandra and Lee. Cassandra paled, color receding from her forehead downward, fingers pressed white along the folder edge. For the first time, calculation failed her. Lee's hand rested lightly on his bag, then released. His voice carved the silence. "You never asked why I walked away." Cassandra, voice brittle, tried, "You're out of your depth." He regarded her without malice. "You never asked why." A breath suspended across the floor. The confession, spoken not in words but in her inability to answer, hung like weather before a storm. The room remained silent. No one moved. "You never asked why I walked away." 6 months passed in near silence. The Caldwell house now bore the confidence of routines remade. Pearl's blue backpack cleaner sat beside a lunch note written by her own hand. "You are braver now," the spelling correct if uneven. The old journal, nearly full, had lost pages to new words. Lee, hair grown slightly, prepared oatmeal as the distant sound of buses drifted from street to window. At Adams Motors, Evan, promoted to chief counsel, waved at Lee as he passed, a gesture of recognition not lost on the watching staff. The rumors about the board chair's medical leave had faded to whispers. Cassandra's office stood empty save for the untouched sonogram and a returned sympathy card. On the steps outside school, Pearl waited, clutching her journal. She looked up as Lee approached, then asked quietly, "Daddy, did you ever wish you had a prettier car?" Lee stooped, matching her gaze, smile genuine. "No, Pearl, we got everywhere we needed together." She grinned, fingers still gripping the dime he'd given her months before. "You fixed a lot more than that old car." Lee straightened, the weight of sleepless years replaced by something steadier. In the end, it wasn't the boardroom or the paychecks that mattered. The world rearranges itself for small acts of competence, for the bridges quietly built between harm and hope. Some reckonings come not in verdict or applause, but in the way a hand fits into another, steady and sure, every new day proof that silence need not be surrender. A light summer rain traced faint patterns on the windshield as Lee waited in the school parking lot, engine humming quietly. He watched the steady flow of children emerging from the main doors, some running, some lingering, all innocent to the complications that eddied beneath adults' words. He sipped coffee warm in his hands, the memory of early morning exhaustion replaced these days by routine clarity. Pearl appeared between two taller boys, head bent as she shielded her worn blue backpack and journal. She spotted Lee's car, sensible, anonymous, unremarkable, and broke into a grin, dashing through the drizzle without hesitation. He opened the passenger side, handing her the hooded sweatshirt she'd forgotten, and she crawled in, tucking wet hair behind her ears. "You remembered my book for library day," she said, voice alight as she found it already waiting in the back seat. "Of course, I know what matters," Lee replied, a smile softening his words. She buckled herself in, settling into the quiet lull that always came after a day spent among classmates. Outside, parents hurried their children away, umbrellas popping open and closed. For a few seconds, they sat together in the hush, content simply to be. "You ready to go see Grandpa?" Lee asked, glancing at her in the rearview, watching the hope bloom in her eyes. Mondays had become habit now, a drive past the old park, a short walk down a pebbled drive where Pearl's grandfather always waited with licorice and stories. Pearl nodded, hugging the journal. "Can I ask him about the car, the one before?" Her tone was gentle, but Lee heard the echo of old uncertainty. He thought of the months past, the boardroom storm that had torn through their days, the way some debts could only be paid in truth. "You can ask him anything, Pearl. He knows all about fixing what's broken." They drove in companionable silence. Potholes rattled the undercarriage, the wipers squeaked, but the car moved surely, proof that sometimes survival itself is its own answer. As they rounded the last turn toward the retirement home, Pearl broke the silence. "Did you ever fix things for Miss Stillman?" Her question hung with the easy innocence of youth. Lee hesitated before answering, giving each word its space. "I tried to help when I could. Some people have to figure things out on their own time." Pearl pressed the dime between finger and thumb, considering. "Do you think she's lonely?" she asked. The honesty of her question ached. It was new and old and real. Lee squeezed her hand. "Maybe. Everyone is sometimes, but sometimes when people try to take things away from others, they end up losing even more for themselves." The rain stopped as they pulled into the lot. Pearl jumped out first, quick and sure, the courage in her step a kind of legacy he'd hoped for but never dared count on. Inside the home's sun-bright lobby, her grandfather greeted them. Pearl dove right into questions about cars and engines, wheels and grease, her spirit undampened by past slights. Lee watched, pride kindling in his chest. These bonds, patiently built, quietly tended, outlasted boardrooms and legacies written in marble. In time, the world forgot the squalls and remembered only who kept the doors open, who showed up when it mattered. After their visit, Lee lingered by the playground where Pearl traced diagrams in the mulch for children too small to understand carburetors but not too young to recognize welcome. He sat on a bench with his father-in-law, both men content with quiet. So they really let her go on leave, eh? The older man said after a while, voice low, conspiratorial. Wasn't my doing, Lee replied. Sometimes the truth finds its own way out. Sometimes people just see what they need to see. His father-in-law laughed, rusty but warm. Smartest thing you ever did was walk away from all that. Some things can't be fixed no matter how hard you try. Lee nodded, feeling no regret. He watched Pearl teaching a little boy how to catch a tossed pebble, her laughter echoing clear across the park. Later that week, Evan stopped by the school lot during Lee's end-of-day cleanup. He waited as Lee finished checking seatbelts, then approached, hands in pockets. You could have outed her, forced a real airing, Evan began, voice pitched low, boards still picking through, well, the wounds. Lee shook his head. Wasn't about her, not in the end. I was fixing what I could reach. I've learned that some people hold on to the wrong things because they're afraid of what comes next. There was a long pause. Rain began again, softer this time. Evan looked down at his shoes. This company, things are different now, small ways but real. Sometimes a small thing is enough. Lee gave a gentle grin. You found your place then. Evan met his gaze, something like relief in his posture. I think so. No one's looking over their shoulder anymore. When they mention your name, it's respect now, not rumor. That's more than I ever aimed for, Lee replied, slinging his bag. Tell them good luck for me. Evan hesitated. Are you sure you're not coming back? He asked. Lee looked over where Pearl waited, tapping out a rhythm on the chain-link fence. It's better for me here. I like knowing for sure who needs me. The two shook hands briefly, but with understanding. Evan left, shoulders lighter than when he'd arrived. Home was a patchwork of chores and small routines that night. Pearl helped with dinner, then finished an entry in her journal. Today I was brave at the swings. Lee tucked her in, reading her latest note out loud, heart swelling. He left her room with the sense, rare but profound, that the world was aligned just right for the moment at least. He washed dishes as dusk gave way to night. The silence was not the hush of isolation, but the piece of work well done, of battles chosen and not regretted. As he placed the last plate on the rack, he thought of Cassandra, her empire, her glass office, her catalog of losses, and the folder with her name and his in silver ink. He wondered briefly if she'd ever understand. He hoped for her sake that she would. The following week at the grocery store, Lee passed a muted headlines rack. Boardroom shuffle continues at Adams Motors. Below, a smaller line, local school bus driver honored for community service. No article, just an acknowledgement, a small ripple where once there might have been a storm. Walking home, he found himself pausing at the playground. Kids were chasing each other, shouting over rules and laughter. Pearl was at the far end, steadying a new friend at the top of the slide. She looked up and waved. He waved back, feeling the extraordinariness of ordinary days. He realized then that it was not victory or vindication he'd gained, but simply the freedom to stay present, here now where he mattered most. And so at last the world rearranged itself around small mercies. A lunch packed, a car fixed, a child met at the gate. The things he had saved, dimes, journals, days, multiplied into something neither boardroom power nor brute ambition could claim. Year by measured year, the rest would fade until only the truest parts remained. Hands held through trouble, words left on the page, and a promise kept in silence. One evening, as summer found its first warm wind, Lee and Pearl sat at the edge of their small garden. She handed him an entry she'd written, hands smudged with ink and dirt. It says, "We are very brave together." She looked up. That's true, right? Lee smiled, sunlight lengthening across his face. That's truest of all, Pearl. Beneath the dusk's quiet, the world moved on, a little softer for their presence in it. The old garden gnome watched their silhouettes blend into the evening, silent guardian of every small victory. Weeds pulled, dandelions wished upon, griefs quietly buried among the herbs. Tomorrow would bring its traces of challenge, a flat tire perhaps, a work notice, maybe just the ache of absence echoing through the rooms at dawn. But tonight the hush was complete. Pearl yawned and leaned against Lee's arm, eyes fluttering from garden to sky. Do you think people can change? She whispered, voice unsure. Lee thought of all he'd witnessed, the brittle armor of Cassandra Stillman, the damage done in pursuit of control, the way hope survived in the creases of lunch notes and the laughter of his daughter. People can change, he answered, rubbing her small knuckles with his thumb. Or if they can't, sometimes the world around them does. She seemed satisfied, tracing the garden dirt with a stick, outlining a winding path. Then maybe someday Miss Stillman won't be lonely. He managed a soft chuckle. Maybe, or maybe she'll grow a garden too. Pearl's smile was sleepy. She tucked her head under his chin. Want to hear my wish? Always. Closing her eyes, she pressed the treasured dime into his palm. I wish for you to be happy, happy like right now. Lee swallowed against the emotion in his throat. That's a good wish, Pearl, best I've ever had. The garden buzzed with the low music of summer. A nearby lawnmower, distant children, the steady thrum of their continued, ordinary life. Inside, dishes waited. Tomorrow's schedule was already set in pencil on the fridge. There would be breakfast, a drive to school, maybe rain, maybe sunlight. But tonight, in the hush between heartbeats, Lee Caldwell sat rooted in the present, his daughter safe at his side. He looked out over the patch of earth they'd tended and found himself, finally, settled. Not at the head of a boardroom, not at the mercy of those who measure a life by title or parking space, but precisely where he was needed. And as night came on, gentle as forgiveness, the world for once felt answered.